Okay, so the last session we had 2 weeks ago, I already talked about the next three of the methods on page 2, so I will skip those now. Let's go to letter G, top of page 3, remembering impermanence. So I don't think this one was actually mentioned in the book by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, but it's a very helpful method. I find it very helpful myself. Just to remember that things are not permanent, they are temporary, they're transitory, like we were talking before with fear. Fear is something that comes and goes in our mind. It's not always there. So if we don't see things as impermanent, then we just kind of instinctively see them as permanent. You know, it's just like an automatic response. I think we did talk about this last time, that sometimes when a problem is happening in your life, or you're feeling lousy, you're feeling depressed, there may be this feeling like, this is going to last forever. I'm going to be like this forever. It's never going to go away. Have you noticed that? It almost seems like, you know, this huge problem that's just permanent, eternal, yeah, never ending. So if you see it that way, for one thing, it's not realistic, it's not true. But then if you do see it that way, it seems worse, right? It seems heavier. Whereas just to remind yourself, it's impermanent, it's not going to last forever. Now it's here, but it'll go away. Maybe in an hour, maybe tomorrow, next week, it'll be gone. So that makes it lighter, it makes it less heavy. So, and it might actually go away more quickly. I've noticed that myself. Sometimes, for example, I wake up in the morning and I say, oh, there's this lousy state of mind, I feel kind of depressed. And I just remind myself, well, it's just a state of mind, it's not going to last forever. And then I, you know, start doing other things, and before I know it, it's gone. It just goes away by itself. So this is true with any problem we're experiencing, whether it's emotional, psychological, physical, or, you know, with people, relationships, and so on. They're impermanent. They don't last. I really like silence. I'm kind of attached to peace and quiet. So when I have noisy neighbors, like I do now, but, you know, I just say to myself, well, you know, they're making noise right now, but it'll stop after a while. And it does. And just that, you know, reminder, you know, that it's not going to go on and on and on and on forever, you know, every minute, 24 hours a day, day after day after. Just remembering that kind of makes me feel, okay, I can manage. The problem seems more manageable rather than overwhelming and unmanageable. So that's a really helpful one.
What helps me sometimes, what helps me when I'm very, very happy sometimes, is I remember impermanence also. And when I fell down from the happiness that I have, I suffer less.
Yeah, that's right. The impermanence, the good times. Unfortunately, they are impermanent too. But like you say, if you remember that, you won't feel so unhappy or depressed or, you know, why? Why did this happen?
And I'm not attached too much to the pressure that I'm in when
Yeah.
I'm pleasant.
Yeah,
When it's pleasant.
that's really good. Yeah, so remember impermanence about good things as well, because then you won't be so upset when they disappear. Just let things come and go. So this is very much a theme in Buddhism, you know, impermanence. Things come, things go, things change. Good times come, good times go, bad times come, bad times go. I came across this wonderful story from the Zen tradition. There was a Zen master, and this man came to see the Zen master, and he was really upset. He had some huge problem in his life, so he's pouring out this huge problem to the Zen master. And the Zen master's sitting there calmly listening. Finally, when the man stops talking, the Zen master says, "It'll go away." Then, sometime later, the man comes back again to the Zen master. This time, big smile on his face, really happy, and he says, "Oh, that problem that I had last time, it's gone." And the Zen master says, "It'll come back." So the wisdom of the Buddha. This helps us to, take things more easily rather than be so caught up, emotional about things. Okay, then on page 3 of this handout, there's just a few other little bits of things from different sources. The first is Thich Nhat Hanh. There's a wonderful book written by Thich Nhat Hanh. It just came out a couple of years ago. It's called No Mud, No Lotus, The Art of Transforming Suffering. Has anyone seen that book?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a really sweet little book. It's very small, but very, very nice, very practical. I don't know, there's something about Thich Nhat Hanh, the way he teaches, the way he writes. It's just so inviting. It just feels like I really want to do what he's saying, It just makes it sound so nice. Anyway, so that's a really nice book if you want more advice on transforming problems.
They are talking about the book,
Oh, okay.
about Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yeah. So this is from that book, just one little method. When we have a problem, because he talks a lot about how, if we get upset about problems and we try to run away from them or we try to push them away or whatever, it just makes things worse. So he says it's better to accept problems. And so he talks about how we can do this with the breath. Come home to your breath and silently say, breathing in, I know that suffering is there. Breathing out, I say hello to my suffering. So that idea of saying hello to our suffering, usually it's the opposite. I mean, it's the last thing we want to do. We want to say, get out of here, get lost. Right? I don't want you. But that kind of attitude, pushing, trying to push it, trying to reject it, trying to get rid of it, it just makes things worse. Have you noticed? Just sets up additional tension. So to say hello to suffering is like, wow. And it's hard to do, but if you do it, try it. It's really magic, saying hello to your suffering. And just, let's skip over to the third thing on the list, the guest house. Have you come across this before? Rumi. How do you say his name? Rumi. Yeah, Sufi master. This is wonderful. So it's similar kind of idea. He says, this being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So that last bit, he's probably thinking of God or Allah. Allah is sending this problem, to teach me something. There's a similar idea in Buddhism, even though we don't have a God or an Allah, but I've come across an idea that when problems happen in our life, we can see them as manifestations of our guru, our teacher, our spiritual teacher. That this is a kind of a lesson from our teacher to teach us something, to give us an opportunity to practice. Yeah. That doesn't mean, I mean, we shouldn't take that literally, that our guru is making us suffer, but it's just a mind training method to help us be more open, more accepting, more friendly to our problems, and say hello to them and see them as opportunities rather than as garbage and trash and, get out of here. And also a book from Lama Yeshe that I was reading over the summer. It's not here, but it's a book called Becoming the Compassion Buddha. So he also has a similar idea when we're in a meditative state, and he says when distractions, mundane thoughts come into our contemplation, we should not get angry or try to reject them. When superstition arises, we should take advantage of it. You're welcome. Would you like to come in? That's a similar idea. Welcoming these difficulties. Because he says mundane thoughts are your teacher. They give you realizations. They show you reality. So we need some wisdom. We need skill to know how to utilize problems and difficulties and even, things like anger or fear or whatever. We have to know how to utilize these. But there's lots of methods, all these different methods we've been looking at here. So we can learn, we can grow, we can progress along the path by dealing with our problems wisely and skillfully. And then I skipped over this verse from Kristen Neff, this self-compassion verse. So Kristen Neff is the self-compassion lady. She's a psychologist who spent like 10 years doing research on self-compassion, wrote a book called Self-Compassion. She also has a website. And this is really good for people who don't have self-compassion and who tend to have a lot of self-hatred and self-criticalness and feeling bad, feeling guilty, feeling I'm horrible. So if you have that kind of problem, then she has a lot of good advice. So she says when suffering happens, problems happen in our life. This is a little verse that she came up with to deal with the suffering. This is a moment of suffering. So by saying that, we are acknowledging it rather than pushing it away, trying to reject it. We're accepting it, acknowledging it. The second line says, suffering is part of life. So that's reminding ourselves, everybody has it, not only me. It's just a natural part of life. Third line is, may I be kind to myself in this moment. So this is helpful if you have the tendency to beat yourself up and, oh, I'm so horrible, I'm so awful, I'm a failure, I'm a loser, bad, that kind of attitude. So instead of that, be kind to yourself. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the compassion I need. So, if we can't be kind to ourselves, if we can't be compassionate to ourselves, how can we be kind and compassionate to others? So if we have the tendency to beat ourselves up, put ourselves down, flagellate ourselves, then we'll do the same with others. We'll also be critical and judgmental and unkind to them. So it's very important to learn. Not everybody needs this, but those who do have a habit of self-criticalness, self-hatred and so on, then this is something to work on, being more compassionate. And then I just put a quotation at the bottom there from Viktor Frankl. Have you read that book, Man's Search for Meaning? Wow. Yeah, it's good if it's a little higher. Yeah, it's better. Yeah, so that's really inspiring. Another method, which I haven't really come across it in a book. It seems to be more kind of oral, part of the oral tradition, is when you have some suffering, some problem, some difficulty, to imagine it transforming into some beautiful offering, like the most beautiful, delicious cake that you can think of. Okay, whatever you think is the most delicious thing, a cake or a pizza or a big pot of hummus or whatever. Something delicious, and then offer that to the Buddhas, your guru, whoever you take refuge in, whoever you feel connection with. Offer it to them and imagine them enjoying it and being completely blissed out. Have you ever heard of this method?
No.
No. Yeah. Secret method. Ear whispered. Yeah, so try it. If you do have connection with the Buddha, with deities and so on, so those beings towards whom you feel connected and devoted and inspired. So you imagine making this beautiful offering to them. It's quite interesting what the effect is, you know. It sounds weird, doesn't it?
Yes.
Because again, we think of suffering as something disgusting and horrible, and we want to get rid of it. But transforming it into something beautiful and delicious, something that gives bliss, is quite. But try it. I recommend trying it and see what happens. And then there's other traditions that talk about just sitting with the suffering, with the problem, whether it's some mental, negative state of mind or some problem in your life, whatever it is, just sit with it. Similar to Thich Nhat Hanh's approach, just say hello to it and sit with it, welcome it, observe it. Pema Chodron, you probably heard of Pema Chodron. She talks about this method, for example, in a book that she wrote, which is called How to Meditate. But the subtitle is A Practical Guide to Making Friends with Yourself. Doesn't that sound nice? Making friends with yourself. So in that book, she talks about this method. When you're meditating and some disturbing emotions come up, just accepting in a non-judgmental way, in a friendly way, but not getting caught up in what she calls the storyline. The storyline is all the blah, blah, blah. I'm having this problem because of this and that and so on. So putting that stuff aside and just sitting with the problem, just observing the problem. And they have this method also in the Vipassana, Theravada Vipassana mindfulness tradition. So instead of analyzing, most of the methods from our tradition, the Tibetan tradition, involve kind of analysis, which is very good, I like that. But it's also sometimes nice just to observe, just to watch in an accepting way. And then, have you heard of feeding your demons, that method? From Tsultrim Allione. Tsultrim Allione is an American teacher in the Tibetan tradition. And she developed this practice based on the Cho practice, which is a traditional Tibetan practice where you go and sit in a cemetery and you use a bell and big damaru, big drum, and you sort of imagine offering your body to all these demons and spirits and everything. Quite an interesting practice. But anyway, she made just a psychological method without using all the instruments and sitting in the cemetery and so on. So you can just sit comfortably at home and do this with your own visualization. And that's a really interesting practice as well. So I'm not going to go into that, but you can look into that on your own if you're interested. Feeding your demons. It's an interesting name, Tsultrim, Tsultrim. That's a Tibetan name. Tsultrim. She was a nun before. Tsultrim. And then Allione, which she got from her Italian husband after she disrobed and got married. So that's Tsultrim Allione. Allione.
Sutrim is a Tibetan word.
It's a Tibetan word. It means, it's the word for morality or ethics.
That's one.
Yeah, it's so true. So, Sotram Alioni. Feeding your demons. So these methods we've been looking at are things that we do on our own, kind of like being your own therapist, okay? Dealing with problems by yourself on your meditation cushion. But sometimes that may be hard to do, especially if it's a really huge problem, or if it's something that's been going on for a long time. It's very complex, very complicated. So trying to deal with it on your own, you might find your mind is just going around and around and around in circles and you're not able to get out of it. So if that's the case, it can be helpful to talk to somebody else, to talk to a meditation teacher or a therapist or just a good friend. Because talking can sometimes help you to see other perspectives, other ways of working and dealing with things. So it's okay to do that. It doesn't mean you just have to be by yourself dealing with these problems on your own. So it's fine to seek outside help. However, even if you go to a therapist or a lama or whatever, they can't take away your problem. They can't solve it for you. You still have to, do it on your own. But at least they can give you some help, some advice, some support. So now I would like to move on to looking at this text. So we can pass out the copies, the 8 verses. Yeah. So this is a traditional text from the Tibetan tradition. So this is called the 8 verses of thought transformation. So thought transformation is a sort of type or genre of teachings and texts developed in Tibet. And so there's a number of these different texts of different lengths. This is probably the shortest that I know of, only 8 verses. And the basic idea of thought transformation is that somebody who wants to become a Buddha, who wants to become enlightened and help all living beings reach enlightenment, so they have to follow this path, the Bodhisattva's path. And that means, cultivating love and compassion and wisdom, practicing the 6 perfections. So there's a lot of things you need to do to become a Buddha. And one of the big obstacles to becoming a Buddha is it's usually called the self-cherishing attitude. This is a state of mind, an attitude that everybody has, where we feel, I am the most important person in the world, in the universe. I am number one. I am the center of everything. Everything revolves around me. So that's what we would normally call self-centeredness or self-obsession, self-absorption, or egotism. These are different terms in English. And so this attitude is an obstacle to following the Bodhisattva's path, because to be a Bodhisattva, you really have to be dedicated to others. You really have to be concerned about others, and eventually be more concerned about others than oneself. It's hard to do that in the beginning, but gradually we can learn to do that. So this attitude of me first is an obstacle to that. And we need to work on it. We need to gradually get beyond that and become more and more altruistic. So self-cherishing or self-centeredness is the opposite to altruism. The term self-cherishing is a little tricky, because if we say, the self-cherishing attitude is wrong, it's bad, we should get rid of it, then it can sound a little bit like we shouldn't cherish ourselves, we shouldn't like ourselves, we shouldn't be kind to ourselves. So that's why it's important to understand it. Self-cherishing isn't just being kind to ourselves, because we should be kind to ourselves. We should, have kindness and compassion for ourselves. So it's more than that. It's where we, overdo it. And we care too much for ourselves. And not enough for others. So it's a question of priority. So the thought transformation teachings and texts are all about how to decrease self-centeredness and increase altruism. So this particular text was written by this master, Langri Tangpa Dorje Sangye, and this is going back about 1,000 years, long time. His Holiness often teaches this text. So I think in the readings for this module, if you were looking at the readings, there's a commentary by His Holiness the Dalai Lama about these 8 verses. Sorry? He taught it already?
Yeah.
Oh, how long ago was that?
It was
Last year?
Half a year, 1 year.
Well, it was last January, second part of last January.
Okay, not too long ago. Okay.
But different people.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt to
Yeah.
hear it again and again, read it again and again. Yeah. So actually, I wrote a book, a book of mine called Awakening the Kind Heart. And the first part of the book explains the 4 measurable thoughts: love, kindness, love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. The second part of the book has an explanation of the 8 verses. Yeah, I don't like to call it a commentary. I don't really feel like I'm qualified to write a commentary, but just to share some thoughts and ideas about the 8 verses. So I really find them really wonderful. So the first verse, we'll just start today, and whatever we don't finish today, we'll continue next time. So what time we finish at 7:30? Right, 2 hours, okay. So the first verse says, determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit for all sentient beings who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, I shall hold them most dear at all times. So this verse is basically about developing the attitude of seeing other beings, other sentient beings, as precious, as dear and precious. And the first line, where it says the greatest possible benefit, this refers to enlightenment, the state of enlightenment or Buddhahood, which is like the highest state we're trying to achieve, the goal of the path. So again, this text is for people who, it's not really beginners, unless you have strong imprints from past lives, but it's people who have some knowledge of Buddhism and the Buddha's teaching, the Buddha's path, the goals that can be achieved, in particular enlightenment, Buddhahood, the state the Buddha achieved. So you're familiar with this material, and you've spent some time thinking about it, and you really feel strongly that that's what you want to do. You want to follow this path and attain the state of enlightenment or Buddhahood. And the reason for wanting to attain enlightenment isn't for oneself. It's not that, oh, there's that great state, that wonderful state, it's so blissful, so wonderful, so pure, I want to go there, I want to be there, I want to enjoy it just for myself. So if you have that kind of attitude, you're not going to get there. It's not going to work. You can't reach enlightenment if you're only thinking of yourself. The motivation that one needs to have to reach enlightenment is thinking of others. I want to help others. Others are suffering, and I can't bear to see them suffering. I want them to be free of suffering, and I want to help them myself. I want to help them be free of suffering, and I want to help them experience happiness. So that's the real goal. The real goal is helping others. Helping other sentient beings. And not just some sentient beings, not just like my family, my friends, the people I like, All sentient beings, everybody, all the people we don't like, all the annoying and irritating and difficult people, challenging people. So that's quite difficult, to really open up our minds and our hearts to all the living beings, all the sentient beings, and feel so much love, so much compassion, so much wish to help them, that we want to follow this path to enlightenment. Because it's not easy. Attaining enlightenment isn't an easy thing. It's really hard work, a lot of effort, a lot of time needs to go into it. So, you know, it can take time just to get to that point where we feel that, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to follow the path, become enlightened, become a Buddha, so that I can help all living beings. So again, this text is for someone who has already reached that point, that that's what they want to do. I want to achieve enlightenment, so that's the greatest possible benefit for all sentient beings. Okay, I want to reach enlightenment, not just for myself, but for others, for all sentient beings. And here it says, they are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. So this is something that is mentioned in Buddhist texts. I guess it's like Aladdin's lamp, right? That's this part of the world, right? Aladdin's lamp, you have this little lamp and you can rub it and the genie comes out and says, what do you want? And, you know, we'll give you whatever you ask for, whatever you want. So a wish-fulfilling jewel is a similar kind of thing. It's a jewel and you rub it and you make a wish and you get what you wish for. So whether there's such a thing or not, I don't know, but it would be nice. But here it's saying that sentient beings are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. So the reason is because with a wish-fulfilling jewel, we can wish for material things, money, a house, a car, you know, that kind of thing. But can we get enlightenment? Can we rub Aladdin's lamp or the wish-fulfilling jewel and say, I want to become enlightened, I want to reach enlightenment, and, you know, bing, the mind is suddenly enlightened. No, not possible. So we have to work. We have to do a lot of internal work to bring our mind to the state of enlightenment. And even other goals of the Buddhist path, like nirvana or calm abiding, shamatha, single point of concentration, wisdom that realizes emptiness. Can we get those by rubbing the wish-fulfilling jewel? No. And even like happiness in our next lifetime, being able to take birth in a good situation in our next lifetime and have good experiences. Can we get that with a wish-fulfilling jewel? Apparently not. So what we can get with a wish-fulfilling jewel is pretty limited. It's just material things, enjoyments, pleasures that are good only for this lifetime. So, but with sentient beings, we can get all those other things. We can get enlightenment, we can get good rebirths in our next life, happiness in our next life, happiness in all our future lives up to enlightenment. We can get with them. How? By holding them precious, regarding them as dear and precious. And first of all, living our lives ethically. That's like a very important starting point for the Buddhist path, is living ethically, which basically means non-harmfulness. The sort of bottom line of Buddhist ethics, morality, is non-harmfulness. And non-harmfulness is related to, I'm just going to hold it, it's just too much trouble. So non-harmfulness is based on compassion, because it involves recognizing that nobody wants to suffer. Nobody wants to be killed or beaten or hurt in any way, physically or with our words or even just with our thoughts. Nobody wants to be hurt. Nobody wants to suffer, just as I don't want to suffer. Okay? So it's like the golden rule. You know, seeing that others are just like ourselves. They don't want to suffer, they don't want to be hurt, they don't want to be treated badly. They want to be treated nicely, kindly, compassionately. They want to be happy. So having that awareness and then living our life in such a way that we at least try not to hurt others. Sometimes we can't avoid it, sometimes we make mistakes. We lose control of our mouth. We say things that hurt others. But usually we know right away that that wasn't a nice thing to say, and then we feel bad. So at least having the wish, the intention to not harm others as much as we can, and then trying to keep that in mind, trying to keep mindfulness of that as much as we can as we go through our life and meet with people and interact with people and so on. So just trying to not harm them and help them as much as we can. Like the Dalai Lama always says, he says, help others as much as you can. And if you can't help them, at least don't harm them. It's kind of like a nice simple guideline for how to live our life. Help as much as you can, at least try not to harm. Try not to cause suffering or harm to others. And if you do harm others, then try to make up for it somehow. Apologize and try not to do that again. Try to learn from that mistake and not repeat it again and so on. So if we adapt that guideline in our life and really try to live our life in that way, non-harming of others, helping others, then by that we will create merit, good karma, and that good karma is the cause for our own happiness in the future, for, good experiences in the future, this life, next life, future lives, and so on. And if we do such activity, such practice with the motivation of bodhicitta, we think, I want to become enlightened to help all living beings. And one of the practices I need to do to become enlightened is ethics, morality. So I'm practicing ethics with that goal, becoming enlightened. So then our practice of ethics and non-harmfulness becomes the cause for enlightenment, becomes the cause for Buddhahood. And again, that's practiced in relation to others, to sentient beings. It's very, very hard to practice ethics if there weren't sentient beings. Like if you were on a planet all by yourself, nobody else around, only you, then it would be hard to practice ethics. Because you don't have other sentient beings that you could harm them, but you choose not to. You refrain from harming them, others, from them. So we need sentient beings to practice ethics. And we also need them to practice generosity. Generosity is another of the very important practices for becoming enlightened. It means giving, sharing. You can be sharing your wealth, your resources, food, drink, money, and so on. But there are other ways of sharing. Sharing your time when people need help, helping them. When people are lonely, going and spending time with them, comforting them. We can also share the Dharma. If we know Dharma and the other person wants to know the Dharma, we can share the Dharma. There's lots of different ways of practicing giving or sharing. But we need others to be able to practice. If we were all alone in the world, the only person in the whole world, then how could we practice giving? Yeah. So, and then of course we have to develop love and compassion and bodhicitta in order to become enlightened. And for that we need others. So does that make sense? That we actually need other sentient beings to become enlightened. We can't become enlightened without them. So that's why they are precious. So this isn't kind of our normal way of thinking. It's not something most of us just think of on our own. But if we hear about this, we think about this, we meditate on this slowly, gradually our mind does start to change and we do start to see others as precious. But also, even just talking about this lifetime, you know, all the happiness, all the good things we have in this lifetime come from others. Where does our food come from? You know, if we were all alone on this planet, what would we have to eat? So the food we have, most of it is grown in the soil by farmers. There's lots of people who work to grow the food and then transport it from one place to another, and then in the factories they make it into whatever, bread and pasta, and put it into packages, or they put it in the market so we can buy it. So all the food we have comes from others. Our clothing, shoes, hats, you know, jewelry, makeup, whatever you wear, you put on your body to be comfortable, to make yourself attractive. So that's also made by others. The house we live in, this building where we can sit comfortably and listen and learn and meditate, these were made by people, what do you call them? Constructors. Okay. And then all the materials, the raw materials, you know, the wood and the cement and the plaster and the glass and everything. So all of these things were made by other people. So this is also a real eye-opener when we think about all the things in our life, everything in our life, everything we use, everything we own, everything we enjoy, the movies we watch, the music we listen to, the devices we play with, the books we read. So whatever it is you enjoy, where does it come from? It comes from others. So this is another way we can recognize the preciousness of others, how others are precious, important. Yeah, how life would be so empty and meaningless without others. So these are some of the things we can think about to make sense of this verse and generate. So the essence of this verse is to generate a sense that others are precious. And that's easy to see with your family and your friends, the people you like, but then with annoying people, noisy neighbors, or other people that you find irritating, it's more difficult to see with them. But another important practice that we need to follow the Bodhisattva's path and reach enlightenment is patience. Patience. So there's actually, I'll leave that for later, because verse number 4. Huh?
It's a tough one, the next one. The second one is tough.
Second one is tough. They get progressively more tough. Number 4 is when we have the difficult people. So how do we work with them? So I'll leave patience for them. So even the difficult ones are precious. They give us a chance to develop our patience, increase our patience, which is such a beautiful quality. And I noticed, I was reading the commentary by His Holiness, which is one of the reading materials for this module. And it's like he was giving a teaching and then people were asking questions. So somebody asked the question, is the purpose of this practice to improve one's own mind or to help others? And His Holiness says, both. And it's kind of funny, sometimes people think either or. It's either this or it's that. It can't be both. And His Holiness says, it's both. You have to improve your own mind, but help others as well. You don't have to, do only one and exclude the other. But this is also important to realize, because sometimes people really want to help others. They just have this kind of natural inclination to go out and help the world and help others and so on. But if you do that kind of work and you don't work on yourself, you don't work on your own mind, what happens?
Puffed up.
Huh?
Puffed up.
Puffed up, yeah, but you could also make mistakes. Yeah.
But you make mistakes and feeling you probably like that anyhow.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, if you never do any work on yourself, if you completely ignore that side of things and only try to help others, then you might not be very helpful for others. You might harm them rather than help them. And because when I was in Singapore, somebody told me there was this. I think it was an old home for elderly people, and it was run by some nuns, Buddhist nuns. And the head nun was a bit of a tyrant. She was like really, getting angry a lot and kind of really heavy and causing a lot of problems. So even though she was in this position where, ideally this is, work to help others, to help elderly people who need a lot of help. They can't take care of themselves, and so it's an opportunity to really help people. But it sounds like she hadn't worked on herself enough, so she could have been more helpful for others, but instead she was creating a lot of problems for others. So there's a lot of stories like that I've heard, and you've probably heard as well, and maybe your own experience. So if we do want to help others, it's great, it's fantastic. And His Holiness especially says, I've heard him say, that maybe instead of going into long retreats, in Tibetan Buddhism there's this tradition of going into 3-year retreats or 10-year retreats, or really, really long retreats where you just go away from the world and you stay by yourself and meditate. And he says, sometimes people do that and then they come out and they're worse than they were before. And they're very proud and, think they're so great because they did this long retreat. So he said, maybe instead of that, it's better to stay in the world and help people, help society. So he really puts a lot of emphasis on that, helping in the world. So it's great to help. However, we also have to look after our own mind. Take care of our own mind, try to make sure that our mind is in as good a state as possible. So both. So that's why I really liked His Holiness's answer. Do both. Work on yourself, but also help others. Okay, then verse number 2. The essence here is developing humility and respect for others. So it says, when in the company of others I shall always consider myself the lowest of all, and from the depths of my heart hold others dear and supreme. So this can sound kind of surprising. The second line, consider myself the lowest of all, lower than everybody. So that may sound a little like putting yourself down and, trashing yourself. I don't think it means that. I don't think it means saying I'm useless, I'm horrible, I'm bad, I'm the worst person in the world. It doesn't mean that. What it means is not having pride, and instead having humility and having respect for others. So we talked already earlier about the the problems of pride, and how it can cause us to look down on others and even harm others. And humility, on the other hand, is a very positive quality. So if that makes sense, if you can see that it's better to have humility rather than pride, then that's the real purpose here. But this doesn't mean going to the extent of thinking I'm horrible and bad and having low self-esteem. So we need to understand the difference between pride on the one hand and self-esteem or self-confidence on the other hand. Okay? So pride is where we feel it's kind of exaggerated, puffed up, exaggerated. I'm so great, I'm so wonderful, I'm better than other people. One of my teachers, whose name is Rilpa Rinpoche, he passed away, but he's a wonderful Lama. He once said that when we're with others, when we're other people around, or we just see other people, we have a mind. I don't think we do this deliberately, but I think it's just an automatic thing to compare ourselves with others. Maybe it's inbuilt in our brain, what scientists would say. And when we do this, when we compare ourselves with others, there's a tendency to end up with 3 attitudes. One is pride. So if we compare with somebody else and we feel, I am better than that person. And this could be because of various reasons. I'm more intelligent, I have a better body, I'm younger, I'm more attractive, I have nicer clothes, I have more money, I have a bigger car, I have a better job. So there could be various reasons why we feel I'm better and they are worse. But anyway, this is one thing that happens where we feel I am better than that person.
Sometimes we feel that we are worse, but not in the way of humble. In the way of, we go somewhere, we feel like that person is better than us, and then we, kind of have violence towards it. Oh, I'm not good. So that is not the humbling
Humility.
That's not you. And I think it's the same like pride, but from the other side.
Well, what this teacher said is, when we feel that somebody is better than myself, there's a tendency to feel envy or jealousy.
But how do you look at the other side? Like somebody that he doesn't feel that he's better, he feels the opposite.
I'm lousy.
Isn't it the same? It's the same phenomena, just on the other.
So you're saying if you feel someone's better than me, and then we kind of put ourselves down and feel I'm horrible, I'm lousy.
And then we develop this thing of and it's terrible, and we start to kind of develop all kind of aversion to that person.
It's envy. It's envy, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's what I'm asking. Isn't it the same? Because we're talking about pride here, but I'm asking, isn't it the other side of not the best, but I'm.
Well, let me just finish first what this Lama was saying. So he said the 3 attitudes that we end up with are pride, when we feel I am better than somebody else, but if we feel somebody else is better than me, then we may end up with envy or jealousy. So envy is where we feel we can't stand the fact that that person has something we don't have, they're better than we are, they have more than we are, whatever. So it's like, I can't bear it. So it's like this very agitated state of mind. And then the third possibility is if we feel that there's somebody who's kind of roughly the same, on the same level, then the feeling that can come up is competitiveness. Wanting to kind of prove somehow we're better than them, getting one step ahead. I can see this in myself sometimes when I'm in a class, for example, we're studying together, we're learning material together, and if there's someone who's kind of roughly on the same level as me, and if a teacher asks a question, I answer the question, I get it right, then I feel ha ha ha, But if the other person answers the question and gets it right, I'm not happy for that. So anyway, competitiveness. It can even come up in these kind of situations, Dharma groups, retreats. Huh? What?
Yes.
What?
We agreeing with you.
Oh, you're agreeing. Okay, yeah.
I don't know what you are talking about.
Yes. Well, but so it's just human nature. It's just our situation as unenlightened beings. We still have these delusions. So we need to be honest. Don't deny or pretend that you don't have them. Acknowledge that we have them, but then also try not to go along with them and feed them and perpetuate them. Instead, work on them, work on overcoming them. So pride then, this is what this verse is about, how to have less pride. So what we can do to have less pride and more humility is to make a point of focusing on the good things of other people, seeing their good qualities, seeing the good things they're doing, feeling happy rather than jealous and competitive. So we can learn to do this. I'm getting better at this. I didn't used to be, but now I'm, So if we train ourselves to do that, work on doing that, and practice doing that, then it starts to come more and more. And it's such a nicer way to be, when we can enjoy and appreciate the good things of other people, the good things they're doing, good qualities they have, and so on. Isn't that nicer than jealousy and competitiveness? And that's horrible. So yeah, before I was also trying to explain the difference between pride and self-esteem. So pride is considered a delusion. It's an unhealthy, unskillful state of mind, something we want to overcome. But on the other hand, self-esteem or self-confidence is something we need. We need that in the path because, especially the Bodhisattva's path, because we're saying, I'm going to become a Buddha and I'm going to help all sentient beings. If you don't have confidence in yourself, how can you possibly do that? We have to believe in ourselves. We have to believe that we have good qualities, we have the potential, the ability to achieve this amazing feat. Right? So we need to have self-confidence, self-esteem, believe in ourselves. But that's not the same as pride. And the way that I see the difference is, pride is like we're comparing with somebody else and feeling I'm better than that person. They are lower than me. They are inferior to me. So that's what happens with pride. Whereas with self-esteem, healthy self-esteem in the Buddhist sense, we all have the same potential. Nobody's better than anybody else because we all have the potential to become enlightened, to become free of all our delusions, to become enlightened beings. We're all equal in that way. Nobody's better than anybody else. Somebody might be a little bit further along the path, but, that doesn't mean they will become enlightened first. You could slip up and fall down, and then the other person will get there first. So, anyway, it's not a question of who's going to get there first. It shouldn't be a kind of race, competition. We're all working towards enlightenment. We're all going to reach enlightenment one day. So it's just useless to think in terms of me being better than anybody else. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yes, and I tend to think in like cinema frames sometimes.
Like
so
a what?
When you say, like cinema.
Cinema.
In a movie.
Yeah, it crosses.
In a movie.
Yeah, I see
Yeah.
like pictures, and when you say pride, so you look down on someone, right? But when you're aware of certain qualities you have, so the right angle to watch it is to want others to help to have these qualities as well. So your aim is to bring them to your level, to help them get it as well, because they can and they have the potential. Not to look down, but to help them get there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's
Yeah.
the end.
So it is true. If you have some good quality and somebody else doesn't have it, or they're lacking in it, then how can I help that person to improve? Yeah. But also impermanence is a helpful thing to impermanence, to just remember that things are subject to change. And especially in terms of physical things, like you're physically healthy and attractive and strong and able to do lots of things, but who knows what's going to happen to us? We could be in an accident, car accident or whatever, and end up with brain injury, and then or some disfigurement in our body. So the things that we have that we may feel proud of, there's no guarantee that they are going to last, that they are always going to be there. So that's also a danger of pride, because if you really take pride in that particular quality and then you lose it, or it gets damaged somehow, you're going to be really miserable. So, anyway. So did your question get answered about?
Yeah, because the second point was the envy, so it's
Yeah.
that was the answer.
But you also mentioned putting yourself down, feeling inferior to somebody else.
Envy isn't envy is a little bit like that.
Well, envy is more, you can't stand that person has something that you have. So you might feel that way, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're kind of degrading yourself. It could, but not necessarily.
It's close.
In a way, it seems it is. Because when you see somebody very successful and then you are not successful as him, so you see yourself as very low because he is much more capable for you, and then you develop resentment against his success.
It's luck. It's luck. If
Sorry?
It mustn't be that he's more capable, but he has luck, and I don't have. But it's not,
It's not here.
it's not
Luck?
always capable.
Luck in Buddhism?
Not in Buddhism.
In the world, yeah,
In
we
the
say
world out
luck.
there. No, it's not here.
Yeah.
envy,
Lucky. Wow.
We say it's karma, not luck.
In Buddhism.
I mean, this is actually one thing I think is helpful when you see somebody who has more or better or whatever. If you can accept the idea of karma, this is what we would say in Buddhism. That person has created the karma to be there, and I haven't. But karma isn't something fixed. It's not like carved in stone and immutable. We can do something about karma. We can create the karma to have what that person has in the future. But to create that kind of karma, we have to do it with good states of mind, not with jealousy and envy and competitiveness. That's not the way to create good karma. So that can be a lesson in karma when we find ourselves in that situation. And the real remedy for jealousy is what's called rejoicing. Joyful. That is feeling happy for that person. I'm so happy that that person has that great big beautiful Mercedes-Benz and $1 billion in the bank. As long as they came by it in a legal way, in an ethical way. We're not supposed to rejoice in people's misbehavior, bad deeds, but if somebody came by their wealth in a proper way, we can feel happy for them. And actually rejoicing is a virtuous thing. It's a good thing. It's a way to creating good karma. So if we can rejoice in other people's happiness and good fortune and so forth, we are creating the good karma that will enable us to have that ourselves one day. So it's much more logical. It makes much more sense than feeling miserable and resentful and jealous and envious and so on. Does that make sense? There's so many wonderful practices in Buddhism that can help us so much. Okay, let's just quickly do the next verse and then we'll have a break. Verse 3, vigilant the moment a delusion appears in my mind, endangering myself and others, I shall confront and avert it without delay. So this has to do with mindfulness, practicing mindfulness. Now, mindfulness can have different meanings. It's not always the same, but here, mindfulness it's a state of mind, a mental factor, something that operates in our mind. And it can be compared to a security guard in a bank or whatever. So the job of a security guard is to stand there and just keep an eye on things. Watch who's coming in and out the door, what are people doing. And they're supposed to look out for troublemakers. Okay? If somebody walks in the bank with the intention of robbing the bank, and the security guard, is sleeping or looking the other way or just sits there and watches this person, they're not doing their job properly. So they have to, their job is to interfere, to do something about this trouble and stop it from happening. So in a similar way, mindfulness should play that role in our mind. Mindfulness is to pay attention to what's going on in our mind, what kind of thoughts are coming up, what kind of emotions are coming up in my mind, and to be on the lookout for troublesome ones, like hatred, anger, jealousy, pride, competitiveness. So there's all kinds of different kind of disturbing or unskillful or negative thoughts and emotions that can come in our mind. So if they come into our mind and we don't do anything about them, then it's like, the bank robber just getting away with the money. So the practitioner, somebody who's practicing the path, needs to watch their mind and try to stop. I say try because we're not always successful. Sometimes it's really hard, but to at least try to, stop our mind from getting all caught up in some negative, disturbing mental activity. This is a lifetime job. Lifetime job. So in the beginning, in the initial stages of our practice, we'll only be able to notice the really gross, obvious, really horrible thoughts, and there's more subtle ones that we may not notice until after many years. So this is my experience anyway. It's a bit like the peeling away the layers of an onion. The onion has many different layers. So in the beginning, you just got the outer ones that are really quite tough, rough, thick. So you peel those away, and then underneath there's other layers that are a little finer, and they get finer and finer the deeper you go. It's like that with our mind. In the beginning we just notice the really rough, gross kind of negative thoughts and emotions and work on those. But as time goes on, we see subtler and subtler ones that we didn't even notice in the beginning. So it's a gradual process of working on the mind. So to do this practice, we need to know what are the delusions. So Buddha's teachings do explain. I think that was one of the modules was about delusions, disturbing emotions. Maybe the one about samsara.
No, I think
Most
maybe
probably.
at the beginning, mind and its potential.
Yeah, that one has, yeah.
The different emotions and
Yeah, okay.
It's yonten, venerable yonten.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah, so there's lists of,
Yeah.
the what do they call the root delusions and
Yeah.
secondary delusions and
Mental factors.
huh? 51,
51.
yeah. So among the 51, there's 6 root delusions and 20 secondary ones, and so it's good to learn those so that we can then identify them when they're in our mind. So like the main ones are anger or hatred, and greed, attachment, pride, jealousy, laziness. That's actually one of the secondary ones, but still, it's a problem.
Jealousy and envy, by the way, are different, right? Because in Hebrew, I think we have one word for it. And envy and jealousy are not the same. At least they have different meanings.
I don't think in Buddhism they have 2 different words. In English we
In
do.
English, yeah.
But they can be used interchangeably, You can say, oh, I'm so jealous of that guy, or I envy that guy. They can be used interchangeably, but jealousy tends to be used more in relationships. When, you're jealous of your partner looking at somebody else, or spending time with somebody else. That's more about people, relationships, whereas envy could be about money or looks, clothes, intelligence, whatever, many things. You can have envy. But yeah, I think in the Buddhist description of the mind, they only have one word. And it's usually translated as jealousy.
Jealousy and miserliness,
Chato.
which is something else.
Hmm?
Miserliness.
Well, miserliness is
That's
another
different.
one. That's miserliness is when you're really attached to your things and you don't want to share them, don't want to give them.
When you're
Like Scrooge.
Kamsan.
Hmm? You know Scrooge? You know that story, Scrooge?
No.
Huh?
There is a story? No.
Charles Dickens. It's just a story, but it's a beautiful story. Christmas Carol, yeah. Charles Dickens' story, The Christmas Carol. Ebenezer Scrooge, he has all this money, but he keeps it all to himself. He doesn't want to share it with anybody, and he's really miserable. Then he transforms. So it's very nice to see that transformation. So anyway, the point here is that we need to watch our mind, and when delusions or disturbing emotions come up, we need to confront them. Here it says, I shall confront and avert it without delay. So we need to learn antidotes for the different disturbing emotions and apply them. This is actually the topic of the retreat next week. It's how to work with disturbing emotions. So there's a lot of material about this, especially anger. There are whole books just about anger, how to work with anger. Well, we need it. Anger is so destructive. So yeah, we really need to know how to work on our anger. But there's some general antidotes. For example, impermanence is really helpful, like we were talking before. If you see some disturbing emotion in your mind, just to remind yourself, it's impermanent, it's not going to last, it'll go away. And sometimes just that itself will enable it to go away without having to do anything else. Also, another thing that's really helpful is de-identify, which is the opposite of identifying. Because what we normally do, sort of just automatically, is identify with our emotions. Anger comes up, I am angry. And we just automatically believe it's me. And that gives it more energy, more force, more power. So if you can learn, it's not that difficult. Just when you notice some disturbing emotion in your mind, to just say, that is in my mind. Anger is in my mind. Jealousy is in my mind. So it gives you some space. Instead of completely buying into it, becoming it. It's like taking a step back, and then you can just watch it. Oh look, there's anger in my mind. Makes a big difference then. I am angry. Just to tell a story, I was teaching this subject once in Italy, Genoa, in a city. And during a break, one man had to go out and put more parking coupons on his car so that he wouldn't get a parking ticket. But he got to his car and realized it was too late. There was already a parking ticket there. But I'd already talked about this method, so he said, just stood there and said, anger is in my mind, anger is in my mind. And it helped him. Yeah, he didn't blow up. Normally he would just blow up and probably start swearing. So it does give you some time to just cool down.
The wood log approach, it's Shantideva.
Wood. Yeah, turn to wood or turn to stone. Yeah. This is really helpful. Try it out. Next time you find yourself feeling angry or jealous or depressed or anxious, what was your anxiety? Yeah. To just say to yourself, there's anxiety in my mind. There's depression in my mind. It doesn't mean it will just go away like that. It may not go away immediately, but it just gives some space.
It's not me.
It's not me. It's just in my mind. It's just a state of mind, not me. It does help. It's very, very helpful. So these are sort of simple methods you could use with any disturbing emotion. So let's take a break. And then we'll do one more verse, and then we'll do a practice with Chenrezig related to these 4 verses.